So Tony, can I ask, in terms of the actions on that, the actions that flow, I think people struggle to reconcile the big global issues, the emergence of China, the effects of the COVID virus, the increasing conflict between nations with their own lives, with the way they are living their own lives. In what way peoples can contribute, in what way do what people do every day in their own lives, how do they reconcile the big issues that are really challenging and sources of anxiety for the future with this issue of, okay, how do we as the communities in which we live achieve greater mental health and well-being? And I wonder whether His Holiness has a reflection on that, because I think people do become somewhat hopeless about the situation because the global issues are so challenging that it starts to play out in their own lives, to feel ineffective, to feel that they cannot reconcile those issues around themselves, for themselves or for their children.
Now, in order to the highest level, international level, some kind of sort of revolution, new thinking. In order to achieve that, first, within your own community, within your own nation, the Australia, once I remember very clear, one museum, the local Australian, remain there, looks like animal. Australian white people, they are sort of normal human being. But local Australian, some, remain like, animal. I really shocked. One museum. So now, old thinking, firstly, king, queen, go like that. Now they're gone. Now we have to think, everybody, we are same, equal. So we pay special sort of take care those poorer section of people. Especially in India, I think very, very important. Okay. 다 가셔서. 가.
지원이 수술 산에 나라가니 이것이 디가만 계급 거슬 내양다 점린 차를 배워야 이제 돌아야 셈되시고 니 거슬 냠도 즉 제마신이다 시간이를 시대 셈디간이다.
Now, basically, as one Indian master, mentioned, any problem, we analyze. The problem, through analyzation, possibility to overcome, then full self-confidence and try our best. If the reality, no way to overcome, then should not demoralize, but is more or less nature phenomena, then you should accept. I think that is true. So many problems which we are facing, now these phenomena, new illness, now these things, there are doctors, some scientists, they really work hard. So I really admire, thank. So we ordinary people should not discourage. We should not determine. Gradually these problems will overcome. Like that.
So can I ask again, Tony, because we were discussing earlier on the concept of hope. Because I think the issue, the crisis we have in mental health and well-being at the moment, particularly amongst young people, is a crisis of hope, and hope being based in the genuine possibilities of finding solutions to these complex problems. So I think, this is one of the situations where people like His Holiness and whatever have the capacity to inspire young people or inspire action at a local level. So I'd be really interested to hear His Holiness's comments about the traditions in which he comes from, about how hope is explained and how hope is transmitted effectively to the next generation.
가사.
미럽 사바든 줄라 지 레와 말라야기 지 답시도 컨테스팅 양랑서 때지 겨 베베 슝도 토네 컨테스팅 나야나스.
As I already mentioned, I think in next perhaps 1 century, I think there's no danger. So we have to work, pay more attention about ecology, and then water, these things. Then I think about one decade, 1 century, I think we will have, you see, like the present normal sort of way. And meantime, we pay more attention about, as I mentioned earlier, ecology, and then preserve this water. Eventually, this water dry. Then we face a lot of difficulties. Sometimes I feel, you see, maybe unrealistic sort of idea. Now we already have, you see, sort of knowledge. You see, use seawater, transform sweet water. So in Africa, Sahara, this big sort of area, you see, from Mediterranean or some other sort of sea water, we can, with our new technology, you see, this water can transform sweet water. Then, like Sahara, big desert, and also Saudi Arabia, big desert can become more cultivate green land. Human population increasing. So then food, these things, we have to think more serious. So these big land can be cultivated land. I think within one century, I think we can utilize these things. Then after that, ourselves also. Then my life, now 87-year-old, so I have no worry. Those younger generation, eventually they face, you see, due to global warming, there is real sort of danger we'll face. So then, I think as a Christian practitioner, then think of God, reach God's place. And then we, Indian believer, there are different sort of planet, so we reborn in this area.
Can I ask another question, Tony? A lot of the worlds that we are in, when people talk about happiness and inner peace, a lot is presented in our world as something of a retreat away from the problems of the rest of the world to focus on trying to make oneself more calm or more peaceful, as distinct from, and I think we see this in younger people, concern that older people and people who've reached a certain age sort of become more preoccupied with their own inner world and have retreated from the wider world. And most of what His Holiness has spoke about is about very active engagement with the wider world and the big problems. I just wonder about trying to reconcile those things, trying to stay calm or peaceful in an inner world and sort of a contented life and a compassionate life, that sort of tension with actually being engaged, as His Holiness has indicated, with a very complex world.
가서래.
지당 매망부치 다시 간년 체백을 항상 수 셈시움신이 수수 간년 하나다 수수 기부 중에다 대대로 삼 당주고 그랬어. 디인디 상가다 직디 나와다 냠도 지조 삼당나 신념도 컨테스트 제시하고 그랬어. 디도식 상관에서.
Now concern about world. You see, individual sort of best interest is happier world. So therefore, here you see, we really need sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings. So at least next 1 century, I think, okay. Then after that, nature phenomena, you see some big change, then we can't do anything. So next 1 century, I think some of these problems we can solve, we can overcome. So sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, you see the serious or also the difficulties after 1 century, 2 centuries. So while we are alive, see, it is also senseless while there is danger, but still we fight each other, killing each other, and especially you see use different religious faith and killing each other. Terrible. Here we really need sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings. Firstly, believer or non-believer. Then among the believer, different belief. All major religious tradition, you see the same message of love, forgiveness, tolerance, self-discipline. So all major religious tradition carry this message. So that's the basis of religious harmony. Then philosophical field differences, but that useful to different people, different sort of mentality, way of thinking. Then these different philosophy also, you see, relevant, useful. So we have to think all major religious tradition, same message of love, forgiveness, tolerance, and then within that different philosophy, that's up to individual. And also, you see, non-believer, whether they believe the certain religious concept or not, they should practice loving kindness, forgiveness, tolerance. That's a universal value. So, I always say, try to promote a secular way without one particular religious faith, simply as a human being, a warm-hearted human being, and live together on this planet. Yes? Then?
Your Holiness, if I could ask a final question for today. I mean, you've been meeting with scientists over many years, the last 30 or 40 years, with the Mind and Life meetings, as well as at our own conference. And I'd just like to ask you, the question is, at these meetings, what do you feel that you've most been able to contribute to modern science from your own experience? And also, what have you gained from science for your own practice?
Within the major religious tradition, the Nalanda tradition, ancient Indian one institution. You see, according to that tradition, you see, we not much sort of emphasis on faith, but reasoning, investigation. So Buddha himself, you see, expressed my follower, monks, lay people, should not accept my teaching out of faith, but rather thorough investigation. So Nalanda tradition very much sort of use intellectual sort of analytical meditation. We use extensively logical approach. Even so when logical approach, you see, through that way, even Buddha's own teaching, sometimes we find some contradiction, then we have right to reject Buddha's own word. That's why you see in Nalanda tradition, there are many different Buddhist school of thought. You see, they utilize human intelligence, investigation. Therefore, our way of thinking, so analyze, logical approach. So therefore, automatically, we have very close link with modern scientists. The science not based on faith, but analyze, experiment. So Nalanda tradition and scientific sort of research, there are similarities. So therefore, as far as mind is concerned, now modern science, their knowledge very limited. So now many modern scientists now really paying more attention about, you see, knowledge about mind, about emotion, and how to bring inner peace. So now, number of my friends, some great scientists, they really showing interest. So therefore, you see, it is useful to work together with scientists. And then scientists about mind, about emotion, you see, their knowledge very limited. So they really pay much attention about Buddhist psychology, like that. So therefore, I myself consider half Buddhist monk, half scientist. So therefore, investigation, experiment, very important, very important. Then now, especially among the scientists who carry research about our brain, you see, their knowledge about brain up to some level, you see, they are really expert. But then mind, the sensory level mind, then we call sixth mind, and sixth mind also you see different level. You see, in this field, the Indian tradition, great yogis, their explanation is something very useful. So make a distinction, grosser level of mind, more subtle level, and innermost subtle level, consciousness. So there are people who already, you see, after death, you see, their body remain very fresh. Next few days and sometimes few weeks remain body very fresh. So up to now, the modern physicists or doctors, you see, no explanation. Now we have, you see, certain also the concept, the grosser level of mind cease, but subtle level of mind keep in the center, also the veins, center veins, like that. So long, the subtle mind still remain in the body, then body, although you say a heart beating, stop. The circulation, blood in brain no longer there, but the body still remain very fresh. So this shows the Indian or yogis or explanation, the different level of mind, and the subtle mind remain our body, and then your body still remain fresh. So these are now some scientists also now showing interest. One, my friend, Russian, Moscow universities, some scientists, now they special pay attention about these phenomena like that. So we have, you see, further more research work in new phenomena like that. Okay. Then.
And Your Holiness, what has modern science been able to contribute for your practice? What have you been able to learn from science has been useful for the inner world?
About emotion, about mind, there's not much to learn from science. we already have sufficient knowledge, which kept over 1,000 years in India. But to scientists, you see, they also realize a lot of the useful new information. So we can work together. But basically, people also consider me as a scientist. I myself also describe half Buddhist monk, half scientist. So the scientific way of thinking, very good, not based on faith, but investigation. That's very good. Then scientists can learn already, you see, learn some useful information about mind, like that. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, His Holiness. So I would like to thank you so much for your contribution to the conference today, and also for Professor Hickey. Thank you, Ian. It's wonderful to have your perspective as well. Your Holiness, we wish you continued good health, particularly in these times. We wish you a very long life, and we really hope to be able to see you again soon, hopefully next time in person, in better circumstances.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
I'm quite sort of also the confidence. Next, I think, at least 10, 20 years, I will live. So there's sufficient time. We can further discussions. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We are free. Any question? Any question?
Okay, I do have a question. One question came in, His Holiness. I had a question that came in. In your life, you've encountered, many difficulties. You've been a refugee for many years from your own country and separated from your own people. So you've encountered lots of difficulties. Yet you say you've got a peaceful mind. How are you able to do that?
가서. I often use in mentioning Tibetan culture originally come from Nalanda tradition. As I mentioned earlier, you see, we utilize our intelligence through reasoning. So that I really feel Tibetan culture, richness of Tibetan culture, that is the rich the cultural heritage. So now we physically, not in Tibet, but still 1,000-year-old Tibetan culture, still we carry. Inside Tibet, it's politically, you see, much sort of control, and last you see, few decades, particularly since Cultural Revolution, you see, the Chinese authority is try to destroy Tibetan rich cultural heritage. But that is very difficult. Whole Tibetan way of life is very much in that spirit. So Tibetan, inside Tibet, also you see, they still carry the 1,000-year-old Tibetan tradition. And refugee here, also you see, we carry these 1,000-year-old tradition. And then especially, when we first came India, is outside the world or within India, not much know about the Tibetan 1,000-year-old tradition, which come from Nalanda. Eventually, you see, people, more and more people, you see, realize Tibetan cultural heritage or religious thinking from Nalanda, so very rich. Now, some scientists, some Chinese university scientists, after they saw some publication from here, we Science and Mind, or such sort of publication. So after they notice, you see, these sort of, or say the book, then they really pay more attention. As a Tibetan Buddhism is not just, you see, faith, but a lot of sort of reasoning. So some Chinese now professors also you see now thinking the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is truly Nalanda tradition, and they pay more attention and combine with quantum physics like that. So now, when I saw some picture inside Tibet, you see, the faith which keep in their mind, so through external sort of means, distractions or bully or because of the political education. Now these, you see, 1,000-year-old deep tradition cannot sort of change or destroy. So similarly here, particularly when we come to India, when we wider contact, then our knowledge, you see, truly become something quite vast and quite useful. So therefore, now I think whole world, including some scientists, now begin to realize, you see, Tibetan knowledge, which connected with Nalanda Buddhist tradition, you see, they also now really appreciate. So therefore, you see, time passes. When we come to India, you see, we more or less isolate. Now then gradually wider contact, then you see people realize, you see, Tibetan tradition is quite rich. So we still preserve. And then in South India, mainly in South India, about 10,000 monk students, you see, they carry study continuously. So our knowledge remain generation after generation, go like that. So our knowledge, 1,000-year-old sort of knowledge, and very useful knowledge, very logical sort of knowledge, so we can preserve this knowledge in this country.
So can I ask, Tony, in the context of that, often as people get older, you know, they value knowledge and cultural traditions more. I wonder whether His Holiness would have a kind of advice or recommendations to young people about that sort of tradition of coping with adversity, coping with difficulty through the transmission of knowledge or through the sharing of knowledge between older people and younger people. Do you have a view about how best to actually have that happen?
그래서 벌써 찍었어요. In 1959 and 60, I asked Pandit Nehru, since we have, with our own language, some knowledge there, so we need special school for Tibetan children. The government of India agreed. Then, meantime, as I mentioned earlier, in mainly South India, 1,000-year-old the monastic institution which study this knowledge, at least in Tibet previously, 20-30 years study. For me, myself also, at least 13, 14 years study. When I study, I am quite lazy. So my sort of tutor always keep one whip at me.
I don't know if we can use whips anymore, Tony. I don't know this is
가사. But I think I can say my mind quite sharp. So any subject I easily can learn. In any way, these knowledge really bring inner strength, inner belief, inner peace. So now, including some scientists, more and more people really appreciate our knowledge. So then our school, we already introduced certain sort of Buddhist logical, Buddhist logic. We already sort of introduced some of our school, the logical approach already sort of introduced. And then also you see different institutions, some special sort of a class to study these things. So we, and then inside Tibet, all Tibetan, what you call the living living their own nation, and automatically respect their culture. Now, more and more Chinese also now showing interest. Now, according to some information, in China, Buddhist number about 400 millions in China. Now China become the most sort of Buddhist population, like that. So therefore, truth always lightning, like that. Okay, then
His Holiness, I have a question from our audience. I am conscious of your time, but so maybe your final question. Someone's from our audience has asked, what is one thing you can leave us with today to help cultivate this inner peace that you've been talking about?
가서
단지 semki shidi korla kama naso tarin kyawrum shi kalutis koran so nyembal tene chik labchandago ke chik chumbaina kanjerashi kingwasares kiguenas.
Key factor is, you see, the destroyer of inner peace is anxiety and anger, suspicion. These are the measures of emotion which disturb our mind. So the antidote of these things, firstly, altruism, or we call Buddhicitta altruism. It's a self-centered attitude is the key factor. So for that, altruism open our mind. Then one unique Buddhist philosophy is all phenomena appears something independent or absolute. So like quantum physics, the Nagarjuna philosophy, they say nothing exists as appears. They are mainly much sort of exaggeration about due to our own mental attitude. So the quantum physicists also now say that nothing exists as appears. If you investigate, much depend on mental projection. So these thinking, very useful, very useful. The basis of the emotion which feel something that truly exists as appears, now that reduce. Then on top of that, altruism, the compassion. Altruism, really antidote of self-centered attitude. So combine these two things, unique Buddhist philosophy, everything interdependent, nothing independently exists, and then combined with altruism. I myself daily, you see these two things, infinite altruism. As soon as I wake up, I always thinking, not only in this life, but so long space remain, so long sentient beings remain, I will remain in order to serve them. So that really brings inner strength. Then nothing exists as appears. The deeper reality, everything exists due to other factor, not independently exist. So that's the Buddhist, also Madhyamika philosophy. Nothing exists as appears. Ultimately, just a mere because of the name. So these thinking really very helpful to my own daily practice. So wisdom side, then altruism, method side, these practice really brings the inner peace, inner strength. And then troublemaker, Shandadeva say, troublemaker, our enemy, is actually our teacher. There is enemy, there's a troublemaker, you had opportunity to practice patience, tolerance. Very true, very true. So therefore, you see, these thinking, the Nalendra psychology or thinking, very, very useful, you see, to keep inner peace. So, this practice, as I mentioned earlier, not only one life or another next life, I think millions of years this practice remain. Okay.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's a very practical way to end today's discussion, which has been really fascinating and I think very useful for lots of many people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing you again.
Uh,
Please stay well.
Thank you. Me as a Buddhist monk, my practice according Buddhist sort of thinking. But these, you see, can learn a non-Buddhist or non-believer as a secular way. Simply, you see, psychological thinking. Mm-hmm. So, more people, you see, can use this thinking, not part of a religion, but simply, you see, try our intelligence best way, like that. So, thank you. See you again.
Thank you.